All right, so let's talk about him. Van Jefferson. I think we talked about him a decent amount, but now I'm just going to throw out the video that I've been meaning to release for a while. This is going to be another Jake Raw. Please be sure to like, subscribe, comment. Van Jefferson, let's talk about him. What's going on, right? His fourth season, his final season of his contract, his rookie contract, big year. He's 28 at the end of this contract, so if you're looking for him and, as far as a fantasy perspective, a dynasty fantasy perspective, any bit like that long term, then yes, it's not going to look great. And there might be some guys that don't want to take a risk on him, right? Some teams. But here's the thing with Van Jefferson is that I think, I'll say this right now, the misconception here and the issue with Van is that if we're talking, and mainly we talk about just football here on the channel and not just fantasy football. There are fantasy football folks that have put Van Jefferson in the box that he's not a very good player. And there are people that watch the games from a different perspective, not to throw shade at anybody in the fantasy football community, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But I think there are some fantasy football analysts out there that look at Van Jefferson as just a guy, when in reality, he is the wide receiver 2. He had 800 plus yards in his last season, fully, actually able to start, right? And then last year, he has a shoulder injury. He's got a knee injury. It turns into a knee tear. So he went through the ringer. He came back towards the end of the year, and he was a big key target for Baker Mayfield. So where am I on Van Jefferson? I've brought up Jordy Nelson a lot. And while Jordy Nelson wasn't as old as Van Jefferson, Van Jefferson's first 3 years of his career, 93 receptions, 1,391 yards, 10 touchdowns, and a 15 yards per reception average. Jordy Nelson, for his first 3 seasons, 100 receptions, 1,268 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 12.7 yards per reception. Golden Tate, first 3 seasons, 101 receptions, 1,297 yards, 10 touchdowns, 12.8 yards per reception. Zay Jones, first 3 seasons, 110 receptions, 1,184 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 10.8 yards per reception. And last but not least, Curtis Samuel in his first 3 seasons, 108 receptions, 1,236 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 11.4 yards per reception average. So obviously, Van Jefferson has way more yards per reception than any of those guys right off the rip, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is he has more yards than any of them. Doesn't have as many receptions and has 1 fewer touchdown than Curtis Samuel. So what am I getting at here with Van Jefferson? Well, we don't know how this season's going to go. According to DraftSharks.com, they have a reception total of 53.8 projected, 780.6 receiving yards, and 4.7 receiving touchdowns. Okay, 2 games over 100 yards. I found this interesting, and I think this is honestly where his floor is, 780.6 receiving yards. I think that's his floor right now. I think people are sleeping on the guy. I'm not saying that from a homer perspective. I'm not saying he's going to light the world on fire, but he's a good route runner, good natural hands catcher. He does a great job getting off the line of scrimmage quickly. His releases are really good. And so I think still getting to play with Cooper Kupp and, they'll figure it out. I think Atwell is going to help the offense, but Van Jefferson, make no mistake about it, he's had success deep down the field. Stafford can throw the deep ball. Van can also help you in the, gadget game, whether you want to use him as a guy that you hand it off to on a reverse or an end around or whatever, jet motion. And then he could also help you as a blocker. So Van fits this offense very well, but what's going to happen with him? Is he going to be the number 2 or is it going to be Tyler Higbee? And I honestly think it's going to be Van Jefferson. I think Higbee will have a good year. I think there's a reason why he's back for another season. He's also in a contract year. I'm going to go with Van Jefferson here because Cooper Kupp very well could get double teamed. I know I said this last year is the rationale behind Allen Robinson, but there's just something that I feel like we're missing with Van Jefferson. He's already been kind of put in this preconceived pod, if you will, where he's just a guy. And I don't know if that's the case, because the moment we started to see him emerge as more than just a guy, he got hurt, and he played through the second half of the year injured, multiple injuries. This guy's had a hard time, avoiding injuries throughout his career. Even back to college, dislocated his elbow. He had a foot fracture that was found at the combine. So look, I'm not going to say this guy's a guarantee to do anything, because the injuries are a little concerning. But I'll say this. When Van Jefferson had to be the best receiver on the field against the Raiders and so forth at the end of the year, he did that with a brand new quarterback in Baker Mayfield. I think he had a rapport with Stafford where the season might have looked a little different had he gotten in there earlier and gotten to play, and maybe he would have overshadowed Allen Robinson. I think they tried so hard to make Allen Robinson work, and there wasn't a lot of chemistry there with him and Stafford. And then Van Jefferson missed all of training camp. So I think he's being slept on. And it's not just the stereotypical, oh, they're sleeping on my man type of guy. No, I think Van is a good receiver. I think he has a chance to be a good number 2 this year. And I think, having 780 yards, is the projection. No issue with that. I think that's the floor. I think his ceiling is 1,200 yards. So probably somewhere in between that is where you end up with Van, and that could end up being an 1,000-yard season. But what I'll say is we shouldn't be surprised if that happens. He didn't get a chance to start in 2020 because, Jared Goff, wasn't going to throw the deep ball like Stafford's throwing it. He was like the 4th option, 5th option, only had like 200-something yards. And so he gets a chance finally. His second season, he goes for 800 plus. And then this past season, he's hurt almost the entire first half of the season. And now we've already decided, you know what? Even though what he did his sophomore year in the NFL was impressive and showed development, even though he had to be thrown in there in a pinch with the Robert Woods injury and, just Odell Beckham Jr. joining the fray and, having to learn the playbook. And then, of course, Deshaun Jackson, who just walked out, in the middle of the year. Even though he got over 800 yards in that season, everyone is like, they remember, what did you do for me lately? And whether it's fair or not, that's how Van Jefferson is being judged. So what do I see? This is not a formal, projection for him, but I think this guy can hit 1,000 yards, and it shouldn't come as a shock to anybody. I think a lot of the problem with this projection, which I don't have a huge issue with, but first off, the 4.7 receiving touchdowns, I think he's going to have more than that. Second, I think a lot of this has to do with Stafford. I think there are a lot of people, I'll have another video about Stafford. I think there are a lot of people that are sleeping on Matthew Stafford. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, Van Jefferson's a lot younger, but it's the same deal where Stafford, it's what did you do for me lately? When if you actually look at that, what he did for you lately is he looked pretty darn good against the Saints before he got hurt in that game. And that was his last game of last year. But yeah, I got to tell you, if you're buying stock in Van Jefferson, it depends on how much you're buying for, but I'm in on Van Jefferson this upcoming season. You have Tutu Atwell, and I'm not saying he can't emerge, and Ben Skoranek and Puka Nacua, but I feel comfortable with Van at number 2. I would say Tutu number 3, Ben and Puka Nacua battling for 4. I'd probably give it to Ben, Skoranek. So, yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, Van is being slept on. And, I just think when you look, I mean, the one concern is, his injuries aren't great, but he's a 200-pound, 6'1" receiver, gives you great size on the outside, prototypical wide receiver size. And, this guy, he may not be a superstar, but, he's still a good player. And I think I understand why that they are naysayers, so to speak, because he doesn't have a ton of production because of those injuries. But when he has been on the field, he has produced. So that's something to keep in mind. But just curious, what do you guys think about Van Jefferson? Quick little video, quick hitter, raw, nothing crazy with the, editing or anything like that. But just curious, what do you guys think? Drop in the comments section below. Are you buying into Van Jefferson in 2023? Are you out on him? I want to hear from you guys. I mean, I don't think there's a wrong answer here, because there's a chance that, he does come back, but I think it's a lot slimmer, way slimmer than the chance of him leaving. I think this is probably his last year in Horns, as sad as that is to say, because I do like the guy, but I see the writing on the wall. So let me know. Comment section below. Do you believe Van Jefferson's going to have a good year in 2023? And by good, do you think he's a 1,000-yard receiver, 800, 600? What do you see? What are your expectations? Drop them below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. I'm out of here. Until next time, you guys take care. Later, folks.